In the dead of night, humanity unleashed its deadliest weapon, Hellfire missiles, a storm of fire and destruction. But what happened next defied every law of war and science. The object in the sky, the UFO, didn't just survive, it kept flying, glowing brighter, as if death itself could not touch it. Tonight, we take you on a journey beyond imagination, a journey where a young scientist, a hardened soldier, and a mysterious ship are bound together by fate. This is not just a story of UFOs. It's a story of fear, hope, and sacrifice. Prepare yourself, because this journey will carry you far beyond the stars. Asterisk. They called it a quiet sector because there was nothing left in the world to call quiet after so many years of humming machines and satellite constellations. The desert breathed in slow, warm waves under the stars, heat turning to blue in the distance. At Outpost Meridian, a strip of concrete and solar arrays 2 hours from the nearest road, the night shift crew lived by the low, constant heartbeat of cooling fans and the soft green glow of instrument panels. It sounded almost like a lullaby. Mara's soul had been awake for 14 hours. Her eyes were raw, the corners rimmed with the dry glitter of the desert air. She sat in the operator's chair like someone trying to keep still under the surface of a current, hands on the console, jaw unclenched, listening. Her palms knew the shape of every switch and dial in the room. Her ears knew the difference between the whisper of a satellite ping and the cough of an approaching storm. Tonight she wore her father's old flight jacket, the canvas elbow patched where he'd patched it years before. He had taught her to read the sky the way other people read lines in a palm, where it bent, what it hid. They called over the net because rules said they had to. Meridian, this is which one? You are green. Continue visual. The voice on the other end, Captain Catry, sounded tired in that way leaders do when they are still young enough to care. Mara tapped the her voice a small thing on the radio. Copy watch 1, green. For 3 hours the logs recorded only the usual, migration echoes. A cargo beacon that drifted out of range, a meteor that broke into a dozen tiny fireworks as it entered the atmosphere and gave them all a jolt of childish awe. Then, at 3:12, the radar painted an impossible blip across the northern sector. It arrived as a smear first, a smear that moved wrong. Objects traversed Meridian's grid from west to east or north to south, each with the obedient boredom of satellites and birds. This was something that threaded angles, arrested, and leapt like a fish in a glass bowl. The console spat out a first estimate: speed, altitude, heading. The math collided with itself and refused to stay. The object was 360 meters long if you trusted one sensor, 150 if you trusted another. It was a craft or a cloud or a trick. Mara's training offered her those options in neat rows, but none fit. Visual? Captain Catry came through again. The outpost's thermal scope swung toward the contact as if it were a person turning to look at a stranger. On the feed, the sky looked ordinary velvet, full of the slow breathing of stars, until the craft cut across the frame like a seam in the night. It had no wings, not in any way Mara recognized. It was an arrangement of planes, surfaces, and dark insets like a folded constellation. When it moved, the air around it shimmered as if the world had been painted in watercolor and someone had run a finger along the horizon. UAV. Hunter-Killer Group 1 is holding hot, Catry said. His voice closed around that phrase like a hinge. They've requested authority to engage if it violates exclusion protocols. Mara felt the room change temperature. Protocols were the thin paper that separated their small, ordered world from the globe-spanning machinery of defense and treaty. Authorization went up the chain and back down in a hurry. Chorus of clipped syllables and nervous keystrokes, until a name came across the line that tightened every throat. Authority granted, the message read. Target confirmed hostile. Outside in the dark, something in the sky shifted. The craft, which had previously traced small, indecent arcs, settled into a slow, deliberate climb. In the base, the new systems started to spin their soft, mechanical threads together. The hunter-killer drones hummed like thunder in the distance. Their controllers' hands-on missiles prepped. The weapon of choice was archaic by some measures, lethal by others, a hellfire, guided and old new in the DNA of modern war. It was designed to bite through armor and end a threat cleanly. Mara watched the missile pad lock onto the target like a pair of patient eyes. She thought of her father then. He had worked as a propulsion tech before the contractors took over and the government's budgets were folded into other things. He had said once that you could tell a missile by the way it believed in its own straightness. Hellfires did not think in arcs or hesitation. They trusted vectors. That kind of conviction, Mara had always thought, was a comfort. It simplified the beautiful, messy world into lines you could measure. The missile launched with the single, terrible beauty of a firefly ripping free. Flame and shock and the condensed spray of displaced air, everything happened like a clap. For a breath, their monitors showed the missile's telemetry marching obediently toward the contact. The impact was supposed to be the end. Sensors would register heat spikes, deceleration, fragmentation. Mara's mouth tasted of metal and coffee as she leaned forward, hands unconsciously making the same small movements her father used to make when crossing the Rubicon between hope and knowledge. The picture they expected did not arrive. Instead, the monitor's image blurred, as if someone had smudged a fingerprint across the lens of the world. The missile reached the point in space where equations said contact must be, and then it folded like paper, not folded in the airy, cute way of origami, but more like something heavy and confident being squeezed through a seam it had not anticipated. The missile's frame bent at impossible angles, metal singing at a frequency that should not have been possible outside a foundry. Then, without the violent shudder of fragmentation, without the acoustic signature of collision, the Hellfire simply ceased to be the missile it had been. It unstitched. A ribbon of ionized air traced its former path out into the night like the ghost of a meteor. Mara's console registered nothing, no debris, no heat spike, no flare. It was as if the missile had been invited to step through an open door and decline. Silence hung then. The room was full of it, the kind of silence that had weight. Captain Cattry swore once, softly, that kind of swear that is not for profanity, but for the sudden rearrangement of belief. Their feeds continued to show the craft, and it continued in its methodical climb, leaving behind a slick of pearlescent vapor that refracted the base's floodlights into colors that were not on any chart. Repeat classification, Mara said. Her voice was steady by force. Every operator knows the ritual of repetition, the way it shepherds panic into protocol. Classify repeats, sensors argued. One gave a reading of electromagnetic harmonics that resembled nothing on file. Another suggested a structural lattice approximating composites but not matching any known alloy. A third made a note in a bland, bureaucratic font. Object exhibits negative mass effect, contact lost. Negative mass. The term made Mara's stomach drop. It was fancy-sounding and taught in the kind of classes she remembered torturing herself through during the academy. A physics parlor trick that obeyed math unless it touched reality. Now the phrase crawled across their logs like mold. Voices rose and fell across the network. Commands were issued and withdrawn. Somewhere up the chain, a general who hadn't had to contend with such impossibility in person began to speak into the void, and then the craft did something small and intimate from its belly, a light unspooled, faint at first, like the pale pulse of a firefly, then richer, a wash of blue that lingered and thrummed. The color settled over the base like a shallow tide. Instruments tilted. The compass on one terminal spun like a child's top. Mara felt her skin prickle as if someone were walking barely behind her, their breath on her neck. In the light, on the hull, the craft seemed to adopt a texture, as if it remembered an old quilt and smoothed it. There, traced in a pattern of relief and shimmer, a motif formed, not a language she could read, not yet, but a shape that tugged at a memory lodged under the bone. It looked for a moment like a map of stars, for another like a child's drawing of a tree, for another like a knot one might find in old wood. Mara's throat closed. The pattern made her think of lullabies she had been sung as a child, simple melodies that never truly went away. "Sir," she whispered, Because her voice was small and because the world had just opened a door and it was asking them to step through. You need to see this. Ketri slid forward, eyes wide and reflecting the impossible blue. Through the glass, the craft hung in the sky and kept moving as if to say, "We are still traveling, and you are only now catching up." Below them, messages began to pile, incoming directives. Public channels lighting up with the static of a world waking to an event that would not fit into sleep. Somewhere, someone said, "We hit it." Someone else said, "We lost telemetry." Someone, quieter than the rest, said, "This isn't an object." Mara's heart hammered in her ribs like a small, urgent drum. She stared at the screen until the room blurred around the edges, until the hum of the fans sounded like the ocean. In the hollowness where explanation should have been, she felt something else, a thin, insistent sense that the night had not betrayed them but invited them. Then, as if to answer that fragile invitation, the craft exhaled, and the sound that came from it was not noise but a note. It was low, almost asleep, and it threaded into Mara's bones with the familiarity of an old lullaby she had forgotten she had known. For a second she could have sworn she heard the cadence of her own mother's voice wrapped inside it. The transmission console spit an alert. Above them, the shape in the sky tilted, and light washed over Meridian like a question. The feed zoomed, pixels falling away to make room for something the human eye had not been trained to hold. On the screen, on the hull of that impossible thing, there was movement, slow, deliberate, and shaped like a hand turning a page. Mara's breath caught. Do we ... Do we have visual confirmation of... Ketri started. The line went dead for a single heartbeat, just a fraction of a second. In that sliver of a moment, something else negotiated with the sky. Then, a voice, not over the radio, but inside the room, as if the walls themselves had learned to speak, whispered a name Mara hadn't heard in 15 years. Asterisk. The room shivered. Not with movement, not with sound, but with memory. Mara froze in her chair, her lungs refusing to obey. The voice hadn't come through any speaker, any channel, any rational source. It was as if the air itself had learned to carry meaning. And the meaning was sharp, precise, cutting her open with intimacy. It had whispered her mother's name. Amara, not the clipped soldier's name she wore now. Amara, the name her mother had sung into her ear on nights when storms clawed the windows. The name she had buried when her mother disappeared into the archives of history and rumor, leaving her daughter with only fragments. Captain Ketri turned toward her. His lips parted, his face pale under the glow. "What did you just say?" Mara shook her head, trembling. "I didn't, I swear." The air was heavy, like the desert had drawn breath and held it. The monitors flickered, caught between static and clarity. On one, the craft's image sharpened. Its hull unfolded in a way that wasn't motion but suggestion, edges sliding without moving, angles expanding into new dimensions. The markings shimmered again, not a language, not yet, but the cadence of thought. And then came the second impossibility. The craft responded to her heartbeat. She knew it did. Her pulse hammered in her throat, quickening, and the luminous motifs shifted with the rhythm. Blue shimmered into violet, violet into green, until the pattern spun a tapestry across the hull. They pulsed, matched, echoed. "Telemetry just died," one of the junior techs whispered, his voice shaky, eyes wide as he tapped a screen that no longer obeyed him. It's not letting us track it anymore. His words broke into silence when the consoles dimmed. Every light in the base faded to black. Not like a power cut, not like machinery failing. This was softer, deliberate. The fans slowed. The hum stilled. The desert, for the first time in decades, became silent in the purest sense of the word. In the dark, the craft remained visible, glowing faintly, like a lantern adrift in a bottomless sea. The silence was so thick Mara could hear her own breath shudder. Then, the voice again, Amara's soul. This time everyone heard it. She knew because Captain Ketri staggered back, his hand fumbling at his sidearm, even though what could a gun do against this? The younger techs pressed themselves against their chairs, staring wide-eyed into the impossible. "It said your name," Ketri whispered hoarsely. Mara's hands shook on the console. Her mouth was dry, but her mind reached back, years, decades, to the night her mother disappeared. No body, no note. Just a vanishing. She had been told it was an accident, an experimental propulsion test gone wrong, an explosion that left nothing behind. But what if that had been a lie? What the hell is happening? Someone muttered. What is that thing? Before anyone could answer, the craft moved, not fast, not evasive, but with a languid, deliberate drift, as though it floated on a current no human eye could see. And then, without any warning, the hull peeled open, light bled out, not blinding, not hostile, more like the warm ache of sunrise against closed eyes. It filled the desert basin, poured through the outpost windows, painted every wall and face in hues the human brain didn't have names for. Mara gasped, because she saw shapes inside the light, not bodies. Not machines, memories dot the shimmer folded into images. Her mother's hand on her hair when she was 6. The taste of cinnamon bread from the morning market. The sound of a river she had never seen but somehow remembered. Everyone in the room saw something, their faces slackened with awe, eyes glazed. One tech sobbed openly, whispering Dad under his breath. The craft wasn't showing them its weapons. It was showing them themselves, and then, like a whisper cutting across the tide, came a new image, a Hellfire missile, frozen in the moment before it should have struck. Except this time, Mara saw what the others hadn't. The missile hadn't missed. It had been absorbed. The craft's hull had simply accepted the weapon, unwound it, studied it, as if missiles were children's toys, easily disassembled. In the shimmer of memory and vision, she saw every component unravel, every line of code dissolve into patterns. The weapon hadn't failed. It had been taken. Catri's face was pale as ash. That thing, it isn't defending. It's learning. Mara felt the truth in her bones. This was not just a ship. It was something older, something alive, something that had learned how to weave thought into matter. And for some reason it knew her name. Then, the hook that stole the last remnants of calm, the voice spoke again. Deeper now, layered, as if 1,000 voices hummed in unison. Amara soul, return what was taken. The light cut out, the base plunged back into darkness. The craft was gone, but the desert still echoed with the impossible words, as if the night itself had been branded with them. Mara clutched the console, trembling, because she had no idea what it meant, but she knew this. The sky had just declared a debt, and somehow, impossibly, it had chosen her to pay it. Sleep was impossible. Not because Mara didn't try. She lay in her quarters for hours, eyes shut, body heavy, but every time she drifted toward unconsciousness, the voice returned, whispering, beckoning, return what was taken. She sat upright on her narrow cot, sheets tangled around her legs. The room smelled faintly of ozone, as if the desert itself had seeped into the walls. Outside her window, the stars looked sharper than she remembered, too sharp. As though every constellation leaned closer, listening, her door clicked. Captain Catri stood in the hall, shadows carved deep under his eyes. He had the expression of a man who'd spent the last hours arguing with voices higher than his rank. Command wants answers, he said, voice hoarse. They think we've been compromised, Mara laughed softly, a brittle sound. We were compromised the moment that thing spoke. He didn't argue. Instead, he stepped inside, closed the door, and lowered his voice. It said your name twice. That makes you a liability, Amara, or... He hesitated, searching her face. Or a key, her stomach nodded. You think I know something. I don't. Catri's gaze held hers. You knew that name. The first time it spoke, you reacted. Why? Mara's breath caught. She wanted to lie, to shrug, to bury it, but the memory of her mother's voice lingered too close, too warm. It called me what my mother used to call me, she admitted. Before she disappeared, silence thickened between them. Catri's jaw flexed as he weighed his words. Amara, I pulled your family file. Your mother wasn't just a civilian. She worked black projects out of Site 18. Propulsion experiments. The kind that don't show up in official histories. Mara stared at him, heart pounding. You mean classified myths? Everyone knows those files are not myths, Catri cut her off. He reached into his jacket and slid a worn folder onto her bed. Paper, actual paper, stamped with a kind of clearance that meant prison if you even looked too long. I wasn't supposed to bring this. But after tonight, protocol means nothing. Marat's fingers trembled as she opened it. Inside were blurred photographs, schematics written in her mother's precise, looping hand, and a single phrase repeated across the margins in red ink. The vessel remembers. Her throat went dry. This is her handwriting, Khatri nodded. Your mother didn't vanish in an accident. She was working on something. Something she may have taken with her? And now it wants it back. The words crashed through Marat's mind like a storm tide. Her mother. De Kraft. The voice. They weren't separate threads, they were woven. Before she could respond, the bass sirens wailed. A keening, metallic howl that rattled the walls. Khatri drew his sidearm out of reflex. Though both knew bullets meant nothing here. They rushed down the corridor, boots striking in rhythm with the alarm. The other techs spilled out of their quarters, faces pale. Questions swallowed by fear. In the command room. The monitors screamed static, then cleared. The craft had returned. It hovered lower now, less like an observer and more like a presence demanding entry. Its hull shimmered, alive with shifting motifs. The desert air around it bent, rippled, as though gravity itself were an afterthought. And then the outpost's blast doors unlocked. Not by human command. By it, the heavy steel groaned and parted, revealing the desert night. Warm wind swept in, carrying the scent of sage and dust. Beyond the threshold, the craft loomed, patient and waiting. Every soldier in the room raised their weapon. Mara stepped forward instead. She didn't think, she knew. The thing outside wasn't here for them. It was here for her, the voice threaded through the alarm. Soft but undeniable. Amara soul, return what was taken, follow. Khatri's hand caught her arm. This could be a trap, she met his eyes. It already has me. For a heartbeat they stood suspended, soldier and operator, protocol and instinct. Then slowly Khatri lowered his weapon. Then I'm going with you. Together they crossed the threshold. The desert stretched wide and endless, stars spilling across the dome of the sky. The craft descended a little more, its light washing the sand into liquid silver. The patterns along its hull shifted again, coalescing into something new, not maps, not memories. A door, with a sound like unfolding paper, an aperture yawned open. Warm blue light spilled outward, beckoning. Marat's pulse thundered in her ears. She glanced at Khatri, who gave the faintest nod. The voice whispered one last time. Resonant, layered, undeniable. Step inside. Mara drew a breath. Set her foot upon the sand that shimmered like glass, and crossed the boundary into the unknown. The light swallowed them whole, not blinding, but deep, oceanic, like sinking into water that remembered the sun. Marat's chest tightened as her senses fought to make sense of it. One moment she was in the desert, sand under her boots, wind brushing her face. The next, the ground dissolved into a surface both solid and fluid, smooth like glass, yet warm like skin. She gasped. The air inside the craft breathed. Not with mechanical hiss, not with vents or pumps, but with rhythm, as though the ship itself inhaled and exhaled. A faint pulse echoed through the floor beneath her feet, slow, steady, alive. Khatri raised his weapon instinctively, his jaw set tight. But his hand trembled. Not from fear, from awe. This isn't a machine, he whispered. Mara stepped forward, her fingers brushing the wall. The surface rippled, luminous veins of color blooming where her skin met it. The ship responded. And then, as if to confirm her suspicion, the patterns on the walls shifted, folding into imagery. At first abstract, waves of blue, spirals of green, then sharper, familiar, a face, her mother's. Mara staggered back, her heart seizing. No, the voice nearly broke in her throat. But the wall didn't stop. Her mother's likeness moved, alive in shimmering light, lips parting as though to speak. Khatri stepped closer, scanning with soldier's eyes, but his tone softened. It's her, isn't it? The figure smiled, gentle, warm, and when it spoke, it wasn't through sound. The words were inside Mara's chest. My daughter. Mara's knees almost gave way. Every part of her wanted to collapse, to reach through the light, to bury herself in the impossible embrace. You're alive? The figure tilted its head. Alive as memory, as code, as what they could not destroy. Mara's breath hitched. Her mother's eyes glowed with the same impossible hue that painted the ship's walls. What did they take? She whispered. Her mother's voice wove into her bones. Not what, who. The walls rippled again, reshaping into new visions. A younger version of her mother, standing in a lab. Machines humming, diagrams flashing. At her side, another figure. A child, a girl no older than 8. Mara gasped. It was her, but not her. The second girl had her face, her eyes, her laugh. Yet something in the details was off. The hair a shade lighter, the posture more assured. Katri frowned. What are we looking at? The vision twisted. The second girl was strapped into a capsule, glass lowering over her. Scientists moved like shadows. Her mother stood against them, shouting, fighting, but soldiers dragged her back. The capsule sealed. And then darkness. Mara's throat closed. No, that's not me. Her mother's image flickered, sorrow deep in her eyes. They made 2. You were the daughter I kept. She was the daughter they took. A twin, born from the same cells. An experiment. A vessel. The word struck like a blade. The vessel remembers. Katri swore under his breath, shaking his head. Cloning. Goddamn cloning projects. That's what this is about. Mara pressed her palms against the wall. Desperate. Where is she? Where did they take her? The ship answered instead. The walls convulsed, unfolding into a map of stars. Points of light flared, then dimmed as if narrowing down to one truth. A single system blazed far, far beyond human reach. The image pulsed. Taken, the layered voice echoed. Held, lost. Her mother's figure wavered, dimming like a candle in the wind. I tried to stop them, Amara. I failed. The ship carried me instead, my mind, my fragments, to keep watch. To wait for you. Only you can open the way. Mara shook her head violently, tears stinging her eyes. I'm no one. I'm just an operator. Eh? The ship answered, her heart rate again. The walls pulsed with her rhythm. The craft recognized her as if she were woven into its fabric. Katri gripped her shoulder. You're not no one, soul. You're the failsafe. Before Mara could reply. The ship shuddered, not gently this time. Violent. The walls flashed crimson, tones deep and warlike. Outside, the desert trembled. Katri spun toward the aperture, eyes narrowing. Something's firing on us. Through the ship's membrane, Mara glimpsed the outside world. Black silhouettes filled the sky, drones, squadrons, missiles cutting through night like angry comets. Humanity's response. Fear, dressed in fire, the hellfires came again. Streaking toward them. The ship didn't move. Instead, it sang, a note, low and resonant, rising into a harmony that vibrated every bone in Mara's body. The air trembled, the floor rippled. And then the missiles unraveled mid-air, their forms folding into ribbons of light, absorbed and rewritten. But this time, something else happened. The light didn't fade. It flowed inward, into the ship, into the walls, into Mara, her veins ignited with fire and stars. She screamed as visions poured into her, galaxies twisting, corridors of light. A girl's voice calling for help across impossible distance. Katri grabbed her, shouting her name, but she couldn't hear him anymore. The ship had taken her heartbeat, her memories, her blood. It had chosen her and in the last flicker before darkness claimed her vision, Mara saw it, her twin, floating in a capsule of glass, eyes wide, whispering across the void. Find me. The ship surged upward, faster than sound, tearing through the desert sky as the world below shrank into a pinprick. Mara's soul was gone. Mara awoke weightless, not floating in water, not suspended in air, but in something softer, stranger, like a dream that had chosen to cradle her. She opened her eyes, and the first thing she saw was light. It wasn't the harsh glare of fluorescence or the flicker of screens. This was organic living, Streams of color flowed around her, weaving like rivers of silk. Shapes formed in them, faces, places, fragments of thought. They drifted past like memories half remembered. Some she recognized as her own, a childhood swing, her father's laugh, the last hug from her mother. Others were not hers at all. Soldiers from wars she'd never fought. Oceans she'd never swum. Languages she'd never spoken. The ship was showing her its soul. Mara reached out, fingers trembling, and the river of light bent toward her, wrapping around her hand like water greeting a stone. Her skin tingled. With every heartbeat, more visions came, but one kept repeating, the girl, her twin, suspended in glass, eyes wide with fear and longing, whispering, "Find me into the current of the stars." Mara, the voice came from everywhere and nowhere. Not her mother this time, deeper, resonant, as though the ship itself had decided to speak directly. "You carry the key. Your blood opens the path." Mara swallowed hard. Her body felt heavy now, as if the ship was tugging at her bones. Path to where? The light spiraled, folding into a star map. Systems glimmered like jewels against black. One burned brighter than the rest, pulsing in rhythm with her pulse. She knew instinctively that was where her twin was kept. Katri's voice cut through suddenly. "Soul?" She turned. He floated nearby, clumsy in the absence of gravity, one hand gripping a vein of light as though it were a rope. Sweat glistened on his forehead. He looked at her as if she'd grown into something not entirely human. "What the hell is happening to you?" Mara opened her mouth, but before she could answer, the ship intervened. The rivers of light twisted around her, forming shapes that clung to her skin like armor. Not metal, not fabric, pure luminescence, wrapping her like a second body. She gasped as the suit tightened, then pulsed, synchronizing with her heartbeat. She felt stronger, sharper, as if the universe itself had leaned a little closer. Katri's eyes widened. "It's binding to you," Mara whispered, barely audible. "It's because I'm her. Because I'm one half of what they made." Before Katri could answer, the light fractured. A tremor shook the ship. Colors snapped from serene blues into warning reds. The rivers convulsed, flowing violently now. Pursuit detected. The voice of the ship boomed. Human craft approaching. War state declared. Through the translucent wall, Mara glimpsed them. Jets, drones, and bombers filling the sky, the full weight of Earth's fear launched against this single anomaly. Katri cursed. "They think we're compromised. They'll shoot until nothing's left." The ship's voice resonated again, calm in contrast. "They cannot destroy what they do not understand. But their fire delays the journey. Decision required, defend or depart." Mara's mind reeled. She looked at the stars pulsing in the map. Her twin's eyes haunted her. "Find me." But below, Earth bristled with terror and weapons, ready to burn the sky just to feel safe again. If she chose to flee, she would leave humanity behind. Maybe forever. If she stayed, she risked losing the path to her sister. Katri's voice was sharp. "Soul, decide." Now, the ship pulsed, pressing its question into her veins. "Defend or depart." Mara drew a ragged breath, her voice trembling but certain. "Take us." To her, the ship obeyed. The rivers of light surged, converging on a single point. Energy crackled through the walls, through Mara's body. Outside, missiles streaked toward them in furious arcs. And then, the craft folded. Space itself split open like a seam of silk. One moment they were surrounded by fire, the next they were falling through an endless corridor of stars stretched into ribbons. Mara gasped, heart racing. The ship had abandoned Earth's sky, abandoned safety, and flung them into the void. But the voice was calm, resolute, course set. Destination, the vessel. Estimated time, 1 cycle. Mara clutched the glowing veins that anchored her, staring into the rushing cosmos. A single thought pulsed in her skull, louder than fear, louder than awe. Her twin was real, alive, waiting. And now, the stars themselves were drawing her toward the reunion that could either save them both or end everything. The ship sang. It wasn't a sound in the air, but a resonance in bone and blood, a song woven into Mara's nervous system. As the craft slid through the corridor of warped starlight, every pulse of the ship's rhythm matched the thud of her heart. The more she listened, the less she could tell where she ended and the vessel began. Katri floated nearby, tethered to a vein of glowing light. His soldier's face was carved from iron, but his eyes betrayed him. They were wide, with awe, with fear, maybe both. He hadn't spoken in a long time. Not since the ship tore them from Earth's gravity well and flung them into this river of infinity. Mara finally broke the silence. How long have we been here? The ship answered before Katri could. Time is elastic in transit. For your perception, 3 hours. For external reference, 17 minutes, Katri grunted, gripping tighter. God help me. It talks like a machine, but it thinks like something else. Mara touched the wall. It rippled beneath her palm, welcoming. It's more than a machine. It remembers. At her touch, visions bloomed again. Not random fragments this time, curated, deliberate. She saw her twin. Always the twin. Locked inside a capsule of crystal, pale light washing her face. Eyes open, lips moving, whispering across impossible distance, I'm here. Then the visions shifted. Soldiers in unfamiliar insignia. Cold laboratories carved into rock. Experiments not just on her twin, but on others, children, men, women, all threaded into glass cocoons. Energy pulsed around them, harvested, drained. Katri swore under his breath. They've been using her. Using them all? Like batteries. Mara's stomach turned. The images weren't just of captivity, but of slow erosion, dreams being siphoned away, memories being bled into hungry machines. She felt her sister's desperation, her exhaustion, as if it were her own marrow being drained. She's still alive, Mara whispered, clinging to that single truth. She's fighting, the ship confirmed. Her vital resonance persists. But the vessel weakens. The vessel? Katri asked. Mara's voice cracked as realization dawned. That's what they called her. The twin. The one they took. The ship pulsed acknowledgement. The vessel is the key. Without her, the path closes. Without you, the vessel dies? Mara pressed her forehead to the wall, her tears glimmering in the ship's glow. Then we have to reach her before it's too late. But just as certainty rooted itself in her heart, the stars outside shivered, the corridor of light trembled, bending. The ship shuddered, its song souring. Warning tones resonated through the chamber like a discordant. Choir, pursuit detected, the ship announced. Mara's blood ran cold. Through the translucent wall, she saw them, shadows sliding into the corridor after them. Bending space the way this ship did. Sleeker, sharper, unmistakably human. Katri's jaw clenched. Earth sent a fleet. They've cracked the drive. Christ, they're chasing us. Missiles bloomed from the pursuing ships, streaks of fire splitting the corridor. The vessel tilted, not with thrusters but with thought, slipping between the cracks of physics. Explosions flared behind, but the pursuers held tight, relentless. The ship's voice deepened. Decision required. Evade, risk delay. Engage, risk destruction. Mara's chest heaved. Images of her twin's pale face flashed again, urgent now, begging. Time was slipping. Katri snapped. Soul, we can't fight them. Not out here. But the ship pulsed beneath Mara's skin. She felt its power, the way it could unmake missiles, absorb fire, turn weapons into nothing but song, and inside her bones, something whispered, you are the vessel too. Her hands trembled. Her choice balanced between survival and war. Mara lifted her face, eyes burning. If we don't fight, she dies. Katri's eyes widened. You're saying, but Mara was already answering the ship, her voice steady, her heart aligned with its pulse. Engage! The chamber exploded with light. The rivers of color surged, lashing outward into weapons not forged but sung into existence. Blades of resonance carved through the void, unraveling missiles into ribbons of harmless energy. The pursuing ship swarmed closer, but the vessel turned, opening like a flower, and its song became thunder. Mara felt the power flow through her veins. She wasn't just commanding the ship, she was the ship. Every flash of light, every rippling shield, every shiver of defiance moved with her heartbeat. For a moment, She felt infinite, then the warning struck. One ship, larger than the rest, dark as obsidian, burst through the flames. Its weapons were not missiles, not guns, but something colder. Beams of black light shot forward, tearing into the corridor itself. The fabric of space screamed. The ship jolted, the resonance in Mara's bones stuttering. She cried out, clutching her chest. Katri shouted her name, but his voice was drowned out by the vessel's alarm. Enemy vessel identified. Origin, Earth Command. Weapon, null field. Capacity, erasure. Mara's eyes snapped open, her pulse a frantic drum. The flagship's shadow loomed over them. Null beams slicing toward the core. If they struck, the ship wouldn't just be destroyed, it would be unmade. And Mara with it. The corridor of light quaked like a dying nerve. Space fractured around the flagship's attack, shards of broken starlight bleeding into blackness. The ship's song faltered, shivering in Mara's bones. For the first time since she had entered it, the vessel felt afraid. Katri gripped a tether, shouting over the distortion. Soul, that null beam, it's tearing the whole corridor apart. If it hits us, I know. Mara's voice shook, but her eyes burned with fire. It won't. The flagship loomed closer, a silhouette of cruelty. Its weapons pulsed with the rhythm of human ambition. Cold, mathematical, merciless. This wasn't just pursuit anymore. It was extermination. Inside Mara, something answered. Not fear, not despair. A deep buried chord. The ship heard it too, resonating in harmony. The vessel calls to you, it whispered, words vibrating in her marrow. Answer and you will be more. Vision split open around her, her twin pale, fragile, suspended in that crystalline cocoon. Energy siphoned from her veins into machines that glowed with the same null light now hunting Mara, but her eyes were awake. Awake and fixed on Mara, as though she had always known this moment would come. Her lips formed a word. One Mara had not heard since childhood. Together. Mara gasped. She wasn't seeing an image anymore. She was seeing through. For a flickering heartbeat, she felt her sister's pulse inside her own, and she understood. The ship hadn't chosen Mara by accident. She and her twin were halves of the same resonance. One imprisoned, drained. One free, called. Only united could they ignite the vessel's true form. Katri's voice cut through. We can't outgun that thing, Soul. We run, or we're ash. Mara turned, her hair floating like a dark halo in the shifting light. Running means leaving her to die. Staying means we die. Not if I can reach her. Mara pressed her palm to the wall. The ship rippled, threads of light binding themselves to her skin. Her body arched, caught between agony and transcendence. Take me to her, now. The ship trembled. Direct link is forbidden. Risk annihilation? Do it? The walls of the vessel dissolved. Not physically, but in consciousness. Mara felt herself pulled into the current of stars, dragged across gulfs of space in a torrent of song. She screamed. Not in pain, but in sheer, overwhelming immersion, and then she was there. Face to face with her twin. The cocoon shone like a wound in the dark, its surface veined with machinery. Her sister floated inside, skin pale, lips parted in a ghost of breath. But her eyes, oh, her eyes were alive, molten with defiance. Mara pressed her hands against the surface, though she wasn't sure if her hands were even real anymore. I found you, her twin whispered through the glass. Not sound, but resonance? And I found you. Behind them, the flagship's null beam shrieked closer. Reality unraveling in its wake. Mara felt the choice crystallize inside her chest. She could merge now, link with her sister, fully ignite the vessel's true power, whatever it was. But the cost shimmered like a blade. The ship's voice thundered in her mind. Union means surrender of self. One vessel, not two. Life as you know it ends. Katri's voice shouted through the distance, raw and human. Mara, don't! Think about what you're giving up. Her sister's voice trembled with love and desperation. Please. I can't hold on much longer. The corridor shattered around them. The flagship loomed, null beams splitting space like shattered glass. There was no more time. Mara closed her eyes, the pulse of the vessel filling her every vein. She thought of her sister's smile as children, the laughter in the fields, the promise they had made once upon a time, never to let go. Her tears drifted into the light, and she whispered, "Together." Her twin's hands met hers on the glass. The cocoon dissolved into blinding brilliance. The sisters merged, not body into body, but resonance into resonance. One song doubled. One vessel awakened. The ship roared with new power, the corridor stabilizing, light flooding every fracture. Energy erupted outward, not as a weapon but as a wave of undeniable being. The flagship's null beam struck and shattered like brittle stone against an ocean. The Earth fleet reeled. The corridor bent to Mara's will. For the first time, humanity's pursuit faltered, but within the brilliance, Mara felt herself slipping. She was not Mara anymore. Not wholly. She was something more and something less. A voice whispered inside, "You are the vessel. You are the path." Her last conscious thought before the flood took her was of Katri, his terrified face framed in the glow. She wanted to tell him she was still there. Still Mara, but she couldn't. The light consumed her. And the ship, no, the vessel, sang louder than ever before, carrying its reborn pilot into the stars. The sound of the UFO still echoes somewhere in the cosmos. Mara and her twin, now united, now transformed into the vessel, sing a song that stretches across the stars. Will humanity follow them into the unknown, or destroy itself in fear? That question still lingers, and only time will bring the answer. Friends, if you enjoyed this cinematic journey, don't forget to hit the like button, share this video with others, and tell us in the comments, if you were the vessel, what choice would you make? And of course, subscribe to our channel so you never miss the next story among the stars.